with over 1,000 students taking our courses, our primary work at Menno Simons College is teaching and researching in the areas of development studies and conflict resolution studies. The mission of Menno Simons College is to bring together people with different views, different worldviews, different perspectives on important topics related to our work in conflict resolution and development. And the topic today is clearly an important one, the future of the family farm, and we've got a very interesting panel of people that will bring different perspectives. So we at Menno Simons see the benefit of having people with different views coming and talking about these issues. It's better to talk openly about these issues rather than having those conversations be done in silence in back rooms. It's really important for that sort of thing to take place, we believe, at Menno Simons College. This actually is a part of a series of lectures that Menno Simons College has organized this year, which we call How We Grow, Share, and Eat, Moving Towards Just and Sustainable Food and Farming System, in which we've invited 6 different visiting professors to come and speak over the 2013-14 academic year. Our first visiting speaker, Dr. Martin Entz, is here. I'll introduce him in a moment. And our current visiting professor, Dr. Nettie Wiebe, is one of the other panelists, and I'll introduce her in a moment. So we have this project at Menno Simons College this year to look at this food and farming issue in depth, both through these public lectures, through courses, and our website. But the purpose of the event today is to talk about the future of the family farm. And it was actually Laura Rance who suggested that that could be the focus of the conversation because the UN has declared 2014 the International Year of the Family Farm. Why have they done that? Because they argue, the FAO that is, that the family farm holds certain strengths that have in the past been understated, and that those strengths can provide future viability for farming. And so that's the idea behind the International Year. So we thought this was a great opportunity to talk about, having people come to talk about that issue. So now the goals of this panel, we've got 4 people with quite distinct perspectives on agriculture and the family farm. The goal of this panel is to have them present their different views and interact with one another. That's the purpose. And like I said, this really relates to the mission of Menno Simons College. So it's both to hear their perspectives and to hear them interact with one another that we're seeking to do. Sorry, I'm trying to... So let me introduce the panelists. So. Starting on your far right, we have Mr. David Derwin. For almost 20 years, David has provided clients from commodity risk management, research and trading strategies, and investment management. He's currently at PI Financial Corporation, one of Canada's largest full-service independent investment dealers and commodity futures traders. It's a 3-person team that works with individuals, farms, and corporations from Ontario to BC. So that's David. Then next to David is Dr. Nettie Wiebe, who I mentioned. She's our current visiting professor at Menno Simons College. Dr. Nettie Wiebe is from the University of Saskatchewan at St. Andrews College. She's a writer, speaker. She is a farmer, an organic farmer, and a farm organization leader. Dr. Wiebe has published many books and articles in the area of food sovereignty, land diversity, and rural communities. Then next to Dr. Wiebe is Dr. Martin Entz. I mentioned our first visiting prof. And Dr. Martin Entz is a plant physiologist from the University of Manitoba's Faculty of Agriculture. He is the co-chair of the first Canadian Organic Science Conference held in Winnipeg in February 2012. Dr. Entz has undertaken international development work around the world and has observed how sustainable agriculture has performed. His research interests include organic cropping systems, long-term organic versus conventional crop production systems, etc. He's very active in a variety of fields. Finally, last and certainly not least is Jacco, who has joined us here this morning. He's originally from the Netherlands and was with the Dutch Air Force. Since leaving the Netherlands, he has come to Canada for the last 10 years. He's been in commodities and foreign exchange trading with Refco Futures. in Winnipeg. He's worked with Cargill, and he is currently with an investment firm or he has also worked with an investment firm in BC responsible for risk management and mergers and acquisitions. He's currently working as an investment banker. So you can see we've got a diverse panel, and I'm going to now hand it over to Dan. Dan Webb.
Thanks very much. When you have a panel of people with these qualifications, you're probably wondering what I'm doing here. I'm the comic relief. So if things get too serious, I'll be there to lighten things up along the way. Although I'm sure there's tons of humor built into the whole topic of the future of the family farm. I think that we're going to start off by, and there were some questions that were circulated by Jerry, sort of 20,000-foot questions about the viability and the future, the role that the family farm is playing, what it will play, and also one that I thought was particularly interesting, which is what our experience with the family farm what implications or consequences there may be for developing countries that are just trying to build their agricultural economies or continuing to try and build their agricultural economy. So, some opening statements and then comments, and then we'll get a little interaction as well. Jerry is probably going to have a question to ask, and anybody in the audience, if you have a question to ask, it's really once we get beyond a little bit of the 20,000-foot discussion, please wave, utter a comment, clink a glass, do something to get my attention, and we'll have you get involved in the discussion. So, they told me that there was no particular order, but I'm going to ask Nettie to go first. I'm going to get the visitors to go first, and Nettie Wiebe, please go right ahead.
Well, thank you, and I'm just going to respond to that first question with a resounding yes. We do need family farms. This won't surprise anybody because I'm actually one of those. But it's not just self-interest here. We need family farms for a whole range of reasons, and one of them is good, nutritious food. And we need to protect the cultures of rural communities, and that's something that's often not valued because we're so urbanized, that there are actually neighborhood cultures that need to be protected. We need to protect biological diversity, and you don't do that with massive monocultures and intensive livestock operations. You do that in small ways on family farms. And I think that the health of not only our food, but the health of our environment actually rests on the family farm. That we actually have people out there who love the land, who love their places and neighborhoods and take care of them. Rather than, and I'll be controversial here right away, rather than distant investors who are trying to make a profit from that land. And that's really what they're trying to do. So I've been controversial right at the beginning, but it's definitely yes, and yes for a whole range of reasons that we can explore.
I would, David,
I sense there's some chemistry between you and Nettie. There was lots of eye contact there. So, in 15 minutes you've already created some sort of history here. So, why don't you respond? Make your own comments and respond if you feel it's necessary.
Well, I guess I'm in a bit of a fortunate position because I'm not from a farming background. Where I gain my experiences is dealing with individuals, small farms, family farms, corporate farms, and seeing sort of the global picture of what happens to commodity prices. So I have a bit more of an objective view. I don't think I have enough sort of background to say yes or no, but what I see is the changes that are happening. I do see a lot of family farms that still exist. I see a lot of family farms that are moving to second generation, but I also see a lot of individuals that are out there with their farms and said, you know what, I'm going to sell my farm because I don't have any kids that want to take it over. So there's a lot of reasons for why it's changing. Some of them are local, some of them they just don't want to, some of it is that global aspect. But where Nettie and I did talk a little bit earlier, and I think that's where the connection comes from, and the value is, I mean, we do try and eat a lot of organic food, and I think that is important, and you tend not to see those type of processes take place on the larger scale. Now, there are other reasons for that. I don't know all the science behind it, but I think at the end of the day, what is most important is that there are a lot of changes that are going on in the agricultural world. Some of them we have control over, and there's a lot that we don't, because as big as agriculture is in Canada, on the grand scale of just, I think our wheat production is what, 3 or 5% of the global, so we always think of Canada as being such a large player, but not necessarily. There's a lot of other factors that influence it, so I think as much as can be done here locally, there's also a lot of other factors that almost perhaps override and supersede that. So you always want to see those type of businesses and those family farms continue here, but there's other factors that impact it as well. So that's sort of my initial thoughts on where we're seeing the evolution of agriculture and farming.
Great. Martin, would you like to continue the dialogue for us?
Okay, thank you very much, and good morning, and I love this place. It's a great place for community. One of the things that we've learned is that we're entering this post-industrial age. So you can read more about that. You can, but I see the family farm actually as being a wonderful model for post-industrialism, and an example from history right here in the very rich Red River Valley that we're sitting on. We may not know that this used to be corporate farming country. Back in the 1870s, very, very large farms were established in North Dakota, and many actually in Manitoba. If you know of Kane, Manitoba, the town Kane, that was actually named after Mr. Kane, who ran, like, I don't know, tens of thousands of acres. So these farms were 40,000 acres, 70,000 acres, and they had outside investors come in and operate them and finance them. And how many of you know of this history, the Bonanza Farm history? Yeah, see, very few people know this. And I never knew it until I watched a PBS program about 10 years ago that documented this based on a book. And these farms operated from about 1870 to about 1910, maybe about 1920, and they just evaporated. They just absolutely evaporated because they were financially too risky. And what replaced them? The family farm. And I think that is actually a very important lesson that we teach our students, that these monoliths that have all these outside investors, they couldn't handle the financial risk management. Now, I think our colleagues here will tell us that financial risk management has improved a lot, and I think that's really good, so people don't lose their retirement investments and things. And I'm looking forward to hearing from that. But these family farms replaced these corporate farms. So that demonstrates that they were financially a more resilient, a more functional unit. And I think that continues today. If we look at who's getting subsidy payments from the government, family farms that are integrated, especially with crops and livestock, have received much less subsidy payment than the specialized farmers. And so that's, again, something that we don't often see. Now, the other thing about family farms is that they are also often more sort of ecologically resilient, because there's multiple enterprises, especially with the way livestock and crops are integrated. That creates creates financial risk management, but it also creates biological risk management, and that's really important. And then my final comment on the social side. Nettie talked about the culture, and I think about the inshore fishery in the East Coast, where all the neighbors and the family gets to go fishing once a year, to help out, and the family farm offers that as well. Because how many of you have gone to help, a family harvest a crop? Anybody? Okay, there's lots of hands going up there. And that's a service that no longer is possible with large corporate farms, and it's harder to find. Now, there are many different types of family farms. lots of corporations are family corporations, and so we have to be careful, you know, how we understand this. And farms have gotten bigger because the amount of land required to make the same amount of money has gone up because for a whole bunch of reasons. But so those are my comments. I think family farms are a way of thinking of post-industrial food systems, and history have proven that they are actually more resilient in some cases.
Thank you very much, Martin. Jacco, the comments to this point have been back and forth on the economic viability, and Martin makes an important point about possibly, I don't know whether, Martin, you foresee a future where again the family farm will begin to consume more of available arable land than corporate farming, but you know, I also, are corporate farms, what is a corporate farm, first of all, in this debate, and is, you know, are they always wearing the black hats, so that they always the bad guys in the equation?
Well, a lot of family farms are incorporated,
Yeah.
and and we can't predict the future. But the other thing I should just mention is that most land is owned by families, the vast majority today.
Jacco, as the corporate farm is kind of often held up as a you know, the bête noire of the equation. Are they like, is it a bad influence on the agricultural economy in this country?
In one way, you know, like the agriculture environment is constantly evolving. So the big corporate farms, are they the bad guys? I don't think so. You know, they supply food to the world. You know, like we have a population of more than 7 billion people right now on this globe, and there's, you know, more and more demand. So, you know, they are needed. Family farms, I think it's very important to have family farms. I don't disagree with that at all. I come from a family farm myself. You know, it's like in the Netherlands, my parents had a flower bulb farm, and they were very successful. In the 80s, you know, we had a crash. You know, people were spending their money on food instead of flowers. So the flower bulb prices collapsed, and my parents either had a choice of diversification of crops, so either going into conventional foods, because it was not very organic back then, or sell off the land because the land price was still high. They chose to sell off the land price. You know, it's like I have ample examples in Holland right now as well. When the flower bulb prices collapsed, they went back to wheat and corn and potato farming, and when those prices collapsed, they went back to flower bulb farming. So they're constantly adapting to you know, the economic demand. When Dr. Wiebe, you know, said about big corporations or the investors, the investment banks and all this stuff profiting from farming, you know, like whether you have a farm or whether you're in commodity risk management or investment banking, bottom line is everybody has to make a living, and whether you're a commodity risk manager, there's an educational point of helping the farmer manage their risk in a certain way so they can focus on their farming as well. So it's like buying an insurance. You know, everybody, you know, it's like if somebody has a car or a house, you know, you buy insurance to protect yourself from future occurrences, and that's what risk managers do. Do they make money off of it? Absolutely, just like farmers do when they sell their crops. And so, in that respect, you know, it's a different view, which I don't, you know, necessarily share. That, you know, the investment community are the bad guys that, you know, are affecting the farming community. I think it's you know, I think risk management is a necessity in farming for sure. You know, we're looking at fuel costs, crop inputs. We're looking at hedging their positions as well, because we don't know what the weather's going to be a year from now. So in that regard, you know, I think risk management is important. You know, and family farms. I would love to see more family farms, without a doubt, because you see the demand of food changing as well. You know, you're growing an organic farm. You know, we just spoke about it. You expanded a little bit over the years as well. So to stay small with a 500-acre farm, competing with the big boys, is that viable in the long term? I'm not sure. I'm not sure, because the cost of operating is getting higher as well. And the big corporates, of course, they have the capital backing to sustain their corporate farming. And when you have a smaller farm, the cost of operating a smaller family farm is higher. We talk about equipment. You know, repairing your equipment right now is more viable than buying a brand new, you know, GPS steered combine, and that's true, but on the other hand, too, you buy, like the smaller farms, buy a John Deere tractor as well, which is one of the biggest, agriculture manufacturing companies in the world. We do not make our own agriculture equipment, so it's tough to look at, what is the best way of doing farming. I think indeed when we look at nutrition, the nutrition of the big, the conventional farming crops, the nutrition, especially in North America, is diminishing. Coming from Europe, the crops there still have quite a bit more nutrition in their foods, and that's concerning to me. I think that's something that we can focus on indeed more of big corporate farms, of trying to put more nutrition back into the food, which is going to be a tough one, because to do that, the cost of food will go up as well. And the cost of organic food, it's like it is getting costly for people who cannot afford it. And I would like to see that, being lowered as well in time. So more family farms, will create lower price in organic food.
Well, I think you brought up an interesting point, and it was one of the points that was touched on in the questions, which is the relationship between, if I can put it this way, farm security and food security. And there is at times a concern that the two may not be working in concert with each other. That to really sustain a family farm culture, you need higher food prices. Higher food prices, though, there are implications on the back end, on the front end of that. And I mean, yeah, you're twitching as I say that, but I also, so I'd like you to weigh in on that briefly, but then Nettie, I'd like, because you're twitching as well. So that's how I know where the microphones go. When I see, they go like that. So Jacco and then Nettie, if you want to weigh in on that as well.
Just very briefly, indeed, like what I don't necessarily see here in the North American markets, what I do see in the European markets, especially Holland, because that's where most of my experience comes from, is like Holland is a small country, fits pretty much 2.5 times in Lake Winnipeg with 17 million people. So do we have big farms? It's like not really. We do have very effective farms. Everything is backtracked. They're very, very efficient, logistic-wise, financially wise, risk management-wise. Like the European farming industry is a little bit ahead of the game because they have to manage their risk, it's like more because they're smaller. So what I don't see necessarily here is like family farm cooperatives. What you see in the Netherlands is you have smaller farms, they combine their efforts, they share their equipment, they share their laborers, they hire seasonal laborers as well to help with the farming, and then they bundle their crops and then promote it as such. And I think that's something that we could learn from here, to have small family farms combine their efforts. Not necessarily, to give up their family heritage, but to combine to actually have, a more cost-effective way of operating, which could reduce the price of the family farm foods.
Nettie, yes.
Yeah, let me just weigh in on, I think what I heard, two things I think I heard you saying. One was that somehow the family farm is in trouble because in the bigger world we've got lots of mouths to feed and we'll need intensive, high investment agriculture to get that job done, to feed more people.
No, I was just thinking more about the actual cost of food, what people pay at the store level.
Well, let me just say that in some ways the cheap food, the low price of food, is both artificial because it's highly subsidized, and a lot of the cost is externalized. A lot of the real cost, the ecological cost and the social costs of that cheap McDonald's hamburger has been externalized, and you're not paying it at the front end, but eventually, socially and ecologically, we're all paying it. So cheap food is in some ways a myth. And the other piece is the nutritional piece, and Martin can speak more about that. But I'm completely persuaded, and so is David, obviously, completely persuaded that organic food is in fact healthier and more nutritious.
It tastes better too.
And tastes better. And he's just given me one here. Yeah, tastes better. So it just isn't true that somehow we are well fed, or the world is well fed by this hugely industrialized, chemicalized food system. That's not the case. So if we're actually talking about feeding people, nutrition for people, then we need to think about how we produce the food, not just how cheap it is.
Right, and no, absolutely, and you know, there's some food bank people here, I think. So, David, you know, feel free to weigh in at some point, because you know, there is no doubt that better nutrition, better value, better outcomes, better healthcare, better social, absolutely. But there is also sort of I still think there's a bit of a disconnect between the cost of more nutritious, better food and what some people are able to afford. And often, I think, many people in the public then, there's a backlash towards the agricultural community, especially when you hear farmers talk about how basic food should be more expensive, that that the market price doesn't reflect the reality of what it costs to produce good quality nutritious food. That instantly puts farmers in conflict with consumers a little bit. You know, Martin, is there like who's missing the message there, or what's getting lost in the message? Why are farmers and consumers at odds with each other at times?
I think part of that is the message that consumers, citizens have been, I call them citizens, I've been hearing for 10 years now, is that we need all this technology to feed the world. So look, it may not be the best tasting food, but if you don't buy this stuff, then somebody over there is going to starve. I mean, that's propaganda. The other thing is that nutrition. Yeah, somebody likes their food. The other thing about we lose most of our nutrition in the processing. I mean, there are studies, including our own, to show that food that's produced, I would call it ecologically. Organic is one version of ecological agriculture, is often more healthy. But we lose most of our nutrition in the processing, and Europe has this wonderful food. You know, their wheat is, but it's not as good as our wheat. I mean, you know, right here on the Canadian prairies, we produce the highest protein, awesome, full of micronutrients and everything, and our bread does not taste as good as the bread in Europe, which is, you know, they use a little bit of our wheat and a lot of their wheat, which is lower protein, not so good, and it's because it's not processed. It's you know, it's handled in a more artisanal fashion. So that's another piece of the puzzle, and processed food goes hand in hand with that sort of large-scale industrial boxed up agriculture. Now, on the cost of production, we just completed a 7-year study, and our agricultural economics colleague calculated the cost of production of organic wheat and conventional wheat. Organic wheat costs $4 per bushel to produce, and conventional wheat costs $4.70 per bushel to produce. So the reason organic food is higher is its demand. It's a lot of it is supply and demand. There's very little supply, lots of demand. So that's part of the equation as well.
As Bill, you've completely, you really pissed off David Northcote here. I don't know what's going on. He waved me back here urgently. No, I don't think that's true. But anyways, he does want to ask a question.
Is there dessert? I work at a food bank, and we struggle with several issues. We struggle with the philosophy that we do battle with people that talk about justice for security all the time. And what annoys me is that the economic model can say, well, that's a just model because people get living wages and they can buy food. Stu Clark did a snapshot several years ago about food that's produced in the world comes out of a bucket, and one hole in the bucket
goes to feed families and people and humans. Another hole in the bucket goes out to feed animals. And a new hole in the bucket is to do biofuels. So all of a sudden, food is got this great economic advantage, and it's bought and sold and traded all over the place. And yet in a really rich country like Canada, you've got people that can't afford groceries. And we've got a really, really big problem here. And I just don't understand, I just do not understand why when we want to address it in Canada, we're sort of pushed aside. The economics of this thing doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't make sense. To be able to just say, buy food, we don't deal on the issues of food, and yet there's hungry families in a province or in a country like Canada is wrong. So is that an economic problem? Is it a distribution problem, or do you think all the problem lies with poor people?
Go ahead, Nettie, you're holding the microphone, so
All right,
it's
all
like
right.
the short straw now, so.
Okay, let me just begin with two pieces here. One is that the price of the raw product is so far from the grocery shelf price that there's very little relationship, and that has to do with all the processing. Actually, if you increase the price of the raw product, and the margins along the way weren't also increased, the price on the grocery shelf wouldn't increase at all significantly. You wouldn't even be able to tell. So that's part of the equation. But the other thing is that there is a lot of food, and you're speaking food bank here. Let me just tell you from my personal environment there. I live close to Rosetown, in an area which everybody, even the old farmers, tell me, we have never harvested a crop like we did this fall. We had a stupendous crop. And there are piles of wheat. There are farmers who have been farming for generations and didn't have enough storage for this kind of a crop, because in some places it was double the wheat yields that we had ever seen before. It was brilliant. So there are piles and piles of wheat all around the neighborhood, and because of the sluggish transportation system, but I won't talk about that, it's not moving fast. And in the meantime, when you drive through that country, there's all this grain being stored outside because we don't have room for it. And in Rosetown, the food bank is suffering. There are people suffering food shortages, and there's a food bank. So it has nothing to do with production. It has very little to do with the price of the raw product. It has everything to do with the way the financials and the policies are regulated.
Well, David and Jacco, is there realistically, do you see a future where the return for farmers for growing the best food, not low nutrition food, but where there would be an incentive for farmers to increase the quality of the food they're growing in Canada and North America?
Where that increased cost doesn't get passed along in the transportation, processing, marketing, and ultimately retailing of the food. There's a markup at all of those stages along the way. Is it realistic to expect that we could increase the cost at the farm, the return at the farm gate, and still not see that come through as a higher price in the store? Is that possible? And if so, who would do that? We would want to have them here to talk, I think.
Well, I see that probably more so when you have various farmers changing the type of crops that they grow. It doesn't always have to be a wheat, barley, or oats. You see a lot more pulse crops being grown as well. Lentils, peas, seeds, that type of thing, which very often come with some higher returns, but that's just more driven by what all of us are collectively eating, right? So you see much more foods that contain those types of things. So that's where you see a little bit of that change happening from just what all of us collectively are eating. So there's going to be some decisions on their part to grow a higher margin crop than other ones. Now, are there more costs associated with it? There might be, I don't know the intricacies of growing field peas versus a wheat, but some of them can be much more difficult to grow. So sometimes it has to be the market that does lead it by saying, we'll pay more for you to grow various crops because we want them, they're healthier, they're better protein, it's a cleaner oil, whatever it might be. So that's what I see. Is some of it is a pull, some of it's a push from the farm, but most of the time it's being pulled by them because they're being demanded to grow the various crops. And I do see that on a fairly regular basis across the prairies, just different crops being grown.
Yeah, is it, Jacco, on basic commodities though, which I think is really the stock and trade and concern of people like David, because I don't know how often you include organic lentils in the food basket that they're able to put together. But again, I think David was expressing a huge disconnect. Nettie expressed a great ideal, which is this ideal that we could fairly pay farmers for producing good food and then it doesn't end up, you know, with a $5 loaf of bread on a grocery store shelf. But what we know is
that the higher quality and organic foods do cost more. Is there any evidence anywhere in the world that anybody is getting a handle on this equation where they're getting better food, perhaps organic food, but it's being offered at a just price so that it's more accessible?
I think from a global perspective, like we're very much focusing here on Canada and North America, and you know, our diet here. You know, our diet here is completely different than it is in Asia, where they hardly eat bread, for example. So the whole wheat industry there is completely different than it is here. Nutrition in Europe, kind of, you know, in wheat there, you know, we have, like, they eat a lot more potatoes in Europe than they do here, for example. So it's a completely different diet that we're focusing on. Like, I would love to see more nutrition in the conventional way of corporate farms, without a doubt. Without a doubt, I think there's a big lack of nutrition in food in general right now, and our organic food is you know, taking it up a bit. The cost of, you know, better nutritional food, will that go, you know, will that be higher, or will that be more accessible to the mainstream? You know, it really depends not only on the commodity price, but indeed on transportation and processing costs as well. You know, we've seen the cost of oil, you know, going up significantly, now going down a bit. I mean, that's part of the transportation cost as well. You know, I would love to see the price of oil going down back to $60 a barrel, and you know, the transportation cost will be cut in half, and that hopefully will be, you know, a great effect on nutritional food prices. So I would like to see more nutrition in conventional foods. Is it possible without a price increase? I think when there's more supply, you know, we could see a little bit of a decrease in price, and so I'm not sure if we're going to see that in the next 5 years, however, though.
Sorry, Martin, go ahead. Yeah.
Can I respond to that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think one of the problems with nutrition is we haven't asked for nutritious food. You know, we've asked for tasty food, which is, you know, all that. And so I think we can all sort of excuse ourselves from not doing a better job on nutrition. But we now know more about nutrition, and I'll give you an example of my answer to your question is absolutely yes. We can produce better nutritious food on all kinds of mainstream agriculture. We just have to know what we're looking for. And if we look at milk in the Netherlands, when they learned that cows grazing or eating grass produce much healthier milk than cows eating grain, surprise, surprise, they actually made a major switch to the way cows are raised. And so cows that get more herbage, which is how ruminant animals evolved, eating grass and alfalfa and those types of things, they have a better omega-6, omega-3 ratio. Omega-6 is the bad cholesterol, omega-3 is the good stuff. In nature, if you eat a venison, a deer, the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 is 1 to 1. What we're eating is about 10 to 1, omega-6, omega-3. And that's why you see so much omega-3 fortification of eggs or whatever else. So the Dutch figured out that by changing the farming system, they would produce healthier milk, and it cost about the same. So that's an example of how it can be done, and it's awareness, it's good policy, and the thing that I love about it is it also makes a more ecological farming system. Instead of just growing more grain corn and feeding grain to animals, which is economically efficient, we're here now looking at a system where we have a grass-fed system, more grass, more forage, and you can do that in the winter. You just bale it up and bring it to the cow in the wintertime. It makes healthier milk. And now, our Canadian industry is, you know, they don't even want to talk about this. So if consumers want milk that has a better omega-6, omega-3 ratio, they have to buy organic, because organic says you have to feed so much grass to your animals. So there is a market-driven, education-driven example right there. And there's many, many more. We could go on and on.
I just want to bring up one more.
Education is very important.
Yeah, I have to bring up one more food issue, which is, has anybody not had their breakfast yet? Okay, there's two here? Okay, so, because we've got food coming out, we can't find somebody to eat it. Good, put your hand up again. Yeah. What did you order? Last one. And then.
And anybody else?
Anybody else missing anything? Because sending you home today from this event hungry would be really ironic. Oh, okay, well, while you're waiting for your breakfast. Sorry, you said it.
Yeah, Martin talked about education and awareness, but Nettie was talking about subsidizing farmers to grow the right crops, and I was just into that. I'm sort of opposed to subsidies, so maybe you can address that. Like, how can we drive this nutrition in the market without subsidies, or is subsidies the only way?
You're asking about whether the current system is subsidized.
Well, how can you use subsidies to drive nutrition in the market, and you also talked about subsidies.
Well, part of this is, and I'm a small-scale family farmer, and part of this is to revamp public policy in such a way that it isn't so uniformly hostile to us. That would already help. Just calling off the dogs would already help. Our agriculture policy has, over the last decades in this country, been uniformly focused on higher productivity, more export, cultivating the export market, and ag ministers right now in Asia, I think, doing exactly that, trying to expand the export market for Canadian product. We have nothing against that, except that if all of our agriculture is focused on that, and all of the subsidies are latched to higher productivity and a higher proportion of the export market, it militates against small-scale production in Canada for local consumption. And that's what we see. We see that in transportation, rail line abandonment. We see that in marketing, the decimation of the Canadian Wheat Board. We see all of the kinds of strategies that are specifically, that hook federal policy to big players and investment agriculture and undermine family farming. So that's a big piece of it, and I won't bore you with the details of more of that. But can I just say something else that I heard here?
Absolutely.
And that is that there is a connection between what people want to eat, and that's why you're seeing farmers markets and you're seeing an increase in organic product and so on and so forth. There is definitely a citizen's impact on how we buy food, making a difference in terms of what we farmers can produce and can bring to market, okay? But in the big picture, actually, there's such a corporate dominance in agriculture that a lot of what you're eating, you never asked for. I don't think a single consumer anywhere in the world has been demanding GMO product in their food. Some have accepted it. Some Europeans, for example, have been far less accepting, more skeptical of it. But I don't think that anybody demanded it in their food. And still, it is in most of the processed food you're eating, okay? So to just sort of say simply, well, people are demanding high fat, low nutrition, high sugar, highly processed chemicals in their chemicalized food, I don't think that represents what citizens are actually demanding. The forces that are actually implementing that are coming from elsewhere, okay?
Just to square the circle on this, David just has one more question.
I'm trying to pull all the elements together and say, how does that help a family in Winnipeg that's struggling to feed? And I'm trying to figure that. So two things. When we talk to low-income families, they're trying to find what's the cheapest they can possibly buy to get into their table at the end of the day. The other question is, there's some people saying, I'd like to buy smarter, I can't afford it, I can't afford to get to those places, so it's a transportation problem. So the first question is, why do you think families are struggling so much? Like, is it an economic issue, is it a food issue, or is it all their problem? The second thing is, would you be willing to brand and label where your food comes from, and it's got genetically modified product in it? Would you support food labeling? Where it comes from, and if it's got genetically modified organisms, would that be an economic problem if we did that?
I'm gonna jump in here on the second question, and friend of ours just started a breakfast program in the school that she just retired from, and we had a discussion. What's going to be offered to the children? And I argued, it's got to be wholesome food. It's got to be really wholesome food, because you're probably dealing with a cohort of the student population that really needs all those micronutrients and all that really good nutrition. And so I think one of our problems is, as a society, we think food is food is food, and let's give the lowest cost food to the people who are not able to muster the cash to buy food themselves or something like that. And so how we do that in terms of policy, I don't know, but I do support that we do it. We do it, and there's many studies to show the better learning outcomes of children who are fed nutritious food, which means the micronutrients, which means the secondary plant metabolites, and all these things that happen when food is grown better. It's so important to me. It bothers me so much that we just give people the stuff that's, sometimes I go to the food bin at the grocery store where you can drop off something for Winnipeg Harvest, and I go, yuck, look at all the stuff that we're dropping off here. It's the cheapest stuff, and that's got to change. That's my feeling on that. And how we do that.
Nettie, so you operate, you grow organic food. Okay. What kind of food do you grow? Where is it sold? And is your organic food sold at a price that's higher than non-organic food?
Do we get a premium for organics? In some cases a good premium, in some cases a very, very modest premium. But our real benefit, why it's more economic, it's actually a better economic outcome for us to be organic. The real benefit for us is that we don't have the high cost of chemicals and fertilizers.
So do you actually produce it at a lower cost?
We produce less because our yields are lower than our conventional neighbors.
Right.
But per bushel, I haven't done a comparison. But just on the scale of our economy of the farm, yes, we do better growing organic food, and it's partly the premium.
Right.
But it's also largely the saving on chemicals and fertilizers.
So I'm just going to be the devil's advocate here, because I think that the point that David's trying to make is that your product, by the virtue of the economics of your farm, is already priced out of, it's something that can be consumed.
It's not that, the raw product is not that much higher than conventional grain.
No, I understand that, but when it says organic at the grocery store, there is a premium. I don't know where organic is at a premium at the grocery store. So what force is there in the market equation that's going to offer that better quality food at a price that a large constituency of people who are already having trouble buying good food, whose responsibility is it to make sure that that food is accessible? To get all the outcomes, because Martin, you said, I don't know how we do it, we just need to do it. So I guess, Jacco, do you see a mechanism or a market structure that allows that to happen?
Well, in one way, what this gentleman said here, it's like he's not pro-subsidies, it's like the subsidies that even the big corporate farms get as well, and the smaller farms.
No, the big corporate farms get more. That was my point earlier.
No, for sure. But subsidies are subsidies. There will be, subsidizing of farms. It's like I think, like subsidy, for example, is one way of insurance, and I think, like David and I, we think we can offer different kind of insurance with the hedging methods, for example, and actually use the subsidies, for example, indeed for the less fortunate, and come up with proper educational material, teaching people, what they're eating and what they should be eating, and it's like actually subsidize maybe some better, like healthier food for the less fortunate. I totally agree. I don't think that the less fortunate should be left out of like not being able to buy nutritional food. I think that's, and especially in a country like Canada, like we're one of the most like stable and best economic countries in the world. That this shouldn't happen at all. And I think money should be used wisely indeed to help those who are in need, whether through subsidies, through education. And I think that's highly important, without a doubt.
Let me just agree wholeheartedly with that view that it's doable. Partly we're not seeing the whole picture. Partly we are subsidizing through medical care, for example, and through all kinds of other social services, persons who we could solve a lot of those problems if we had better nutrition. So it's a question of whether you do it at the front end with better nutrition and ensuring that you have good school lunches, or whether you later see people whose health status is deteriorating because they've been poorly nourished in their childhoods, okay? So in some ways the social cost, it depends on where we're putting our social expenditures. But let me just say one other thing about the marketplace and the risk in the marketplace. One of the things, and I want to speak to this in the lecture on Thursday evening, one of the things that's happening in farming, and it's happening whole scale, and I'll show you some data on Thursday evening at the lecture, in my neighborhood. One of the things that's happening is that land, the productive asset for food production, is being scooped up by outside investors big time. And it's kind of under the radar because it's not front page news. But if you start looking at, it's front page news, and those of you who work in international development know that land grabbing is one of the problems in Africa and Asia. But let me just say that market intrusion, that financial market intrusion into buying assets is a huge phenomenon here in the prairies. Have I frightened you into coming to the lecture?
You know, I see that a lot on the land side, and the clients that we'll work with on the farming side, because we also do investment work, but they ask them just, you know, the financial state of the farms, and say, well, every last penny we got, we're putting it back into buying more farmland, which is not necessarily, you know, that's no surprise, but what you do see a lot of, and we all know that there's been a lot of, and this is all relative, right? There's a lot of European buying decades ago, and now you're seeing a lot more Asian buying that's coming in. I hear that from talking to clients, and a lot of investment funds too, pension plans and hedge funds, and because they're looking at it as investment. But we've really had almost a bit of a perfect storm, and I think Jacco and I were talking about this earlier for land prices in the past, you know, 10, well certainly 10 years, if not longer. But grain prices have doubled in value, livestock prices have doubled in value. Oil has gone through the roof. Interest rates have been extremely low, so all those have combined to make it a really good time to buy, you know, for farmland. Going forward might be different because now you have a lot of big money that's pushing it up, perhaps out of reach out of other farmers, and that might just self-correct itself too over time. Don't know, but markets tend to work that way. Things get far too extreme in price, and then it corrects itself. And maybe that's also, as Martin was saying a little bit too, where you start to see the instability of the large financials and the corporates taking on a lot of debt to buy their farmland. Prices collapse, they sell out, and then you see a little bit of you know, a recurrence of that family of resurgence. Doesn't mean it's going to happen that way, but you know, I guess coming from the market side, the market does take care of itself. It may seem very fair at extremes, depends who, but it over time, you know, you do see those trends move in and out. So it's a process, it's a cycle, and maybe we'll see it revert back the other way.
My comment on that, you know, like I agree with David here. You know, just recently a teacher's retirement fund bought farmland for almost $4,000 an acre. So is that you know, does that create opportunity for a family farm to expand? Not really, because they cannot really you know, forward the price increase of the land onto the food prices, you know, that they distribute. So their margins will be squeezed, and it's harder to operate like a smaller farm, without a doubt. So $4,000 an acre for farmland, and that's very significant. Food, like commodity price, went up over the last couple of years by, you know, probably 30% last year, pretty much. Yeah, so indeed, it's what you say. So what I think is going to happen, land prices will go down again significantly, and some people will be in a pickle because of that. And commodity prices will come down as well. It's a cyclical thing. Great bumper crops. It's a phenomenal time again for, you know, for commodities in the last little while. Family farms will be, you know, squeezed again if they don't combine their effort, because commodity prices will drop, their margins will be squeezed. That's going to be an issue. So I think the only solution there is either diversify your crop or combine your effort in order to be, you know, self-sustainable again.
We
we have a question over here.
John Longhurst, working at the Canadian Food Grains Fund, the National Food Assistance and Development Organization. These are important issues, but I'm wondering what you think about the issue, the challenge we have of feeding hungry people around the world. Over 800 million people in the world don't have enough food to eat, and the population of the planet is growing. What's the solution, the challenge, opportunities facing us there?
It kind of relates a little bit to what Dave was saying at Harvest, and this is obviously a bigger picture idea, but I think a lot of it is quality versus quantity too. Like right now, this is where we all have to look in the mirror to some extent, right? Because we're all guilty of it. And if you can go into the grocery store and buy that big, huge bag of chips or the smaller bag of chips, right? You're always going to go for the large one, and there's a lot. We always want more individually, right? We always want to buy the bigger bag and the better, and that doesn't mean it's going to solve the problem, but I think that's part of it, is that food has become more than just food. It's now a social event, it's fun, it's, you throw parties around it. So I think we've really taken food for granted here, and when something gets taken for granted, it does get wasted. Now, is that a trickle-down effect? Eventually, does it make its way around the world? I suppose so. I don't know for sure, but I think there is that, certainly in the richer countries, North America for sure. Europe is not immune to that, and even in some of the growing Asian countries too, there's a lot of food that's being consumed, far more than we all need to. That's more of a social thing, right? It's culturally, food is a big part of what we do. It's celebrated, and it's eaten a lot, and it's wasted. So I don't think that's the solution, but it's something perhaps that all of us individually can at least be aware of and think about.
Nettie, there are a lot of family farms that grow food specifically to be purchased as food aid. Maybe not on a regular basis, but it is, the food being purchased to be donated to another country is an intrinsic part of the agricultural economy of North America. But it has impacts on both sides of the equation, yes?
Yeah, okay. Let me just say that I think food aid is only a very small part of the solution. And I think the people in Food Grains Bank would agree that the best of all possible solutions is as much self-sufficiency in as many places as possible. Grow your own food. But in order to be able to grow your own food and feed yourself, you have to have control over the food producing resources. And it's a huge struggle internationally for what we call food sovereignty, which is people of the land, peasants, having control over their resources. Not just the residual land, so that the best land in Honduras is Chiquita bananas for the North American market, but that the best land in Honduras is rice and beans for Hondurans. And that's part of what skewed the international food system big time, is that there's so much investment money in large-scale export agriculture in a lot of places where there's hunger. And if those resources, food-producing resources, could be repatriated to the people who grow food for themselves and their communities, that would make a huge impact on hunger in the world. And actually, we see that as really the only solution. We are not going to, and then the roast ham example I gave you earlier is, I think, a sort of cartoon of what's happening. We're not going to outproduce ourselves out of hunger. There's lots of food in the world. There is enough food. It's a question of who controls that and who profits from it. So in the bigger, longer term, I think the struggle is over the resources of food. And when I see that something like 5 to 10 times more money is right now going from rich countries to buying resources, land grabs, in so-called developing countries, that is going into aid, it tells you something about what the real power is. Somebody has said once, and I think this is true, all food is politics taken internally. It's really about power over control over the resources.
We're moving very closely to the last few minutes of our panel here. I'm going to try and get a couple more questions in.
Byron Williams. I'm going to go back to some of the early comments I think that Dr. Wiebe made about the community and
cultural ramifications of the increasing concentration of farms and also rural population. I'll give a homegrown example. My hometown of Souris, if you went to the south and west, there would be 9 straight miles of Williams and Yachts' family farms. And that area is still owned by Williams and Yachts, but instead of 7 or 8 family farms, there are 2 or 3 family farms with much bigger ones. And I guess the question is, with all due respect to Dr. Buckland, whether we're having this debate 20 years too late, whether that robust, vibrant rural community comprised of smaller farms is really a thing of the past, and the more likely outcome is just increased concentration.
Are we having this debate 20 years too late? No, we had this debate 20 years ago and 30 years ago and 40 years ago. I've been in this debate for a long time. So we are continuing to have this debate. Is it heading in the wrong direction? Yes. We are continuing to lose small-scale family farming, and the concentration of agricultural resources is continuing to be corporatized. So policy, and now we have a government that's outright hostile to small-scale farming, and the policy demonstrates that. So, yeah, we are, but these are human decisions, these are social decisions, these are political decisions, so we can make better decisions.
I'm Bob Stahl. It seems to me that the model of corporate and chemical agriculture has owed a great deal to the role of agricultural universities and research, largely sponsored by companies like Monsanto. And so for decades we've had the justification and the facilitation of this kind of agriculture out of places like the University of Saskatchewan and Texas A&M and University of Guelph and so on. Two-part question. Is there any hope for significant change to support the kind of agriculture we've talked about, and how would that come about? What role would that kind of research and development have?
Well, coming from an agricultural college here at the University of Manitoba, it doesn't look great. I appreciate your comments. I agree with you. I think it goes back to the beginning of the Green Revolution. Before the 1960s, universities were teaching the whole of agriculture. They were seeing the farm as a unit that interacts. And the Green Revolution really changed all that. And we have to ask ourselves, what was the Green Revolution? Well, it was really an antidote to the Red Revolution. So Nettie's right, it's all politics. The Green Revolution was governments in the West not allowing Mexico and India to have land reform. And that's where the problem started. So I hate to back up to there, but I think it's really important to know the history. The Green Revolution wasn't about the jolly green giant, coming up with a new crop that's going to feed the world. It was about keeping people from having access to land and giving them technology instead, which, by the way, didn't pay for itself because the Rockefeller and Ford foundations underwrote all that. It wasn't economically viable, so we've been subsidizing what we call the miracle of agricultural green revolution for a long time. Agricultural universities, it's not getting any better because we now have to have at least 30% industry funding to leverage any government funding. That's been around for about 10 years now. So is that helping small industries do innovation, or is that corporate welfare? A bit of both. So it's tough sledding. There is a change though, and that is that young people, we actually see an increase in small farms in Canada for the first time ever. And but these are nano farms. But that's what the kids can afford. So more power to them. I love it. And they're demanding something different. So in Canada we have, and I hate keep having to come back to organic agriculture, but in the absence of any substantive.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, let me finish, Nettie. In the absence of any decent rules by the Cargills, by the absence of any decent rules by the Canadian government, that's become the default. And but in Canada, so I'm back to my example. In Canada, there's now all of us universities have gotten together, and we have a certificate in organic agriculture. We have about 12 courses that people can take at different universities online. But I take your point, and it's a serious problem. Today is the 21st. If you go to the University of Manitoba visionary discussion tomorrow evening, they're going to talk about how to feed the world. I'm very curious in terms of what they're going to say. You know, I'd encourage you to go to that visionary conversation. Nettie and I aren't on that.
Yeah, I just want to comment on that real quickly. Is, you know, is there a possibility of change? Absolutely. You know, like we've seen, you know, it's like the banking industry change, you know, over the last 100 years significantly from, you know, from being for the people, for being for the institutions, and now, you know, going back to highly regulated. We've seen it in the car industry, and, you know, coming back to your point, you know, it's like, what is it going to be? How are we going to feed the poor? That will change as well with nutritional food, without a doubt. There will be higher demand, and, you know, it's like, whether it's a corporate world or the family farm, they will respond to it. There's no doubt in my mind. Like if you have non-nutritional food and we keep going like this, you know, we're not going to be very healthy. People want to be healthy, want to live longer, and they will look at alternatives, you know, to have more nutritional food. Whether it's for the poor and needy, you know, they will be fed. You know, it's like, will it be in the next 20 years? That's hard to say, but that we will see change without a doubt, and in universities as well. You know,
sorry.
We're going to get another question.
I totally disagree.
Oh,
I think water runs downhill, and there has to be some change. I'm not talking about revolution, but there need to be some rules have to be changed in this country. The banking industry, you know, they just got away with it by that much in Canada last time. So I disagree. We can debate that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they're interested in the banking industry.
That's tomorrow morning's breakfast. International financial institutions and morality. Tomorrow morning for breakfast.
Okay.
Hi there. So I've been thinking about this. I don't know a lot about agriculture. The only agricultural product I know anything about in any detail is beer. That was not meant to be a joke, by the way. So there's kind of the same issue with there's the large brewers that produce really terrible beer, and craft brewing is grown at about 5% clip each year, while the market is contracting. The way they've done it largely is by creating their own distribution mechanism, in that they sell off premise and so forth. And I wonder, when you look at organic food, I see it in the supermarket, but you don't see, you do see farmers markets and so forth, but is there potential maybe for kind of creating new avenues such as farmers markets, maybe co-ops and so forth, so that they can get around the system and work to their own strength rather than trying to overcome the challenges they have within the existing mechanism?
That's what you see with Peak of the Market right now as well. You know, I think it's a great idea to have indeed like more of a cooperative structure with family farms, organic farm, for example, to bundle their strengths and to combine their efforts. Absolutely.
I'll make a quick comment on that, because we'll often go to the grocery store and we'll look by, like, let's say Safeway. I mean, a couple of years ago there was a fairly large section of it. Now it's a much smaller section, so we asked the fellow that, you know, lenses, well, why is it such a small section? And I kind of knew the answer. He said, well, no one's buying it. So part of it is just demand for it, right? Just like the craft brewers, and I agree with you, they taste much better. But then it's also the education factor too. Like, and I'll use the beer example just to exemplify. I remember bringing it's a local brewery, Farmery, and we're probably all familiar. I remember bringing it to a Super Bowl party, and it was nothing but Budweiser beer. I bring this out, and it was like, wow, this tastes really good. I'm going to buy it next time. So it's that education thing that I think it's a place to start. It's a slow start, but that's where a lot of it begins. Is I still think individually. I mean, we learn more, we make different choices, and hopefully that all spreads.
Last question.
Actually, it's sort of two comments. One is there were some comments about production and the further producing of food. The problem with not having nutritious food is partly that people think that eating fresh foods is more nutritious, whereas food that is frozen or canned and right from the field is more nutritious than a lot of the fresh foods we buy. But that is an educational thing that, you know, once again, we need to educate people about.
Also, to a certain extent, I think talking about food production as a solution to hunger is looking at the wrong end of the stick. We need to look at making sure that everybody is not living in poverty. We need to make sure that people have the money.
Is there any response? Okay, I think we're going to wrap things up now. So just a couple of kind of final words. I think that we've heard some really wonderful comments from all four people, and we've heard some advocation for some certain positions, and clearly there's a lot more to talk about. I just want to make the case that I'm an advocate. And I'm an advocate for education and building knowledge about important issues like the family farm and agriculture. And so I just want to put a plug in for Menno Simons College, which is a part of Canadian Mennonite University. This is something that we are wanting to do, build knowledge, because for markets and for political systems to work well, citizens need to understand and we need to engage. So this is a really key thing. And I wanted to remind folks and thank Nettie for mentioning her talk on Thursday evening at 7 o'clock at the University of Winnipeg's Eckhart Gramate Hall. You're all most welcome to come. It's free charge. 7 o'clock at the U of W. And also Martin Entz was our first visiting prof. We've got a video clip of his presentation as well as our other two speakers on our website, which is you can go to the Menno Simons College website and you'll see the link there if you'd like to view Martin's presentation. So finally, I'd like to thank, first of all, I'd like to thank the panel. So I wonder if we could take a moment and just to... Thank you for coming early this morning and contributing so much. I'd like to thank Dan Lett with the Free Press. I guess he's disappeared. He's here. So I'd like to thank Dan for all your help. And just finally, the Menno Simons College staff have been really helpful. So I'd like to thank them. And finally, I'd like to thank you all for coming. I know it was early in the morning and it was cold, but thank you all for coming. I hope you have a really good day. So thanks again.